tonight's meeting, the council meeting for Tuesday, February 9th, 2021. 7:01 p.m. We're beginning. First order of business is to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I will stand. The rest of you will probably sit. So go ahead and do that. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United
States of America,
to the republic
for which
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God, indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Next order of business tonight is the roll call. Mr. Antel.
Present.
Mr. Bartko.
Here.
Mrs. Miller. Okay.
Are you
Heard
here?
her say
Janet?
here. So Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Fenn.
Here.
And Mr. Poliak.
Here.
Okay. All right. Tonight's agenda has just a couple typos that we'll correct as we're going along. They don't really change the anything in the what's being presented. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented to council.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
So who made the motion? I'm sorry.
I think it was
I know
Don.
Ron Antel seconded, right?
Yeah, Don Polyak did.
Oh, okay, thanks. All right. Mrs. Klingenberg?
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mrs. Miller.
Okay.
I can't hear Janet. She must have her volume.
Is your volume down, Janet? Can you hear us?
No,
Can't hear you, Janet.
Janet, if you can hear us, look on your computer, you might have to increase your volume.
I'm logging there.
Okay,
Mm.
all the way up? Okay. Not sure why we're not hearing you.
no. Shake your head then.
Oh, when you're voting, you can,
Yeah.
I guess. Yes, or whatever. So, all right, not sure. Maybe it'll come back on. All right, we'll move ahead with the approval of tonight's agenda has been approved. Open forum. Do we have anyone, Mr. Poliak, who wants to address the group?
Taking a look here, I'd just like to remind everybody in attendance that if you could use the Q&A, if you'd like to be a part of tonight's meeting, and go ahead and just put your name and address in the Q&A, and I will make sure the mayor knows to give you a chance. And there's no one at this time.
Thank you, Don. We'll
Yep.
go ahead and move ahead then. Next order on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 6th and January 26th, 2021 meeting, and we're approving them together as we agreed to do. So do I have a motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Ron. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ron. Antel? All right. Roll
Mr.
call,
Fenn, Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Yay!
All right, good.
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Davis
Yes.
Right,
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
all right. That motion carried. We will move on to the first ordinance of the evening. It is ordinance 2021-2-2. It is an ordinance granting consent to the Director of the Ohio Department of Transportation Authority to apply maintain, and repair standard longitudinal pavement markings and erect regulatory and warning signs on state highways inside the village corporate limits. Also to remove snow and ice and use snow and ice control material on state highways inside the village corporate limits, and to perform maintenance and or repair on state highways inside the village corporation. In order to consider this, we first need to suspend the 3 reading rule. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Antel made the motion. Heather Davis seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
yes,
and Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. I would now ask for a motion to adopt so we could discuss if there are any questions. Ordinance 2021-2-2.
I so move.
Thank you,
I'll
Ron.
second with discussion.
Okay, Mrs. Miller,
Can I ask a first question?
go ahead.
My first question would be, is this something that we do annually, and is this like a housekeeping measure to adopt this?
Well, it's not always annually. I think this last one, we had a contract for about 5 years, if I'm
Okay,
not mistaken, Mrs. Klingenberg. So, yeah, 5 years, but they send us this, and because of the maintenance. And then if there is a new ODOT project starting in the village, like the Route 8 project, sometimes they have an additional one just for that. But this one is for all the highways to do signage, striping, and repairs on it that ODOT does on their roadways. So we just agree to let them do that. Other questions? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Motion passes, becomes ordinance 2021-2-2. Next, we'll go to resolutions. First resolution is Resolution 2021-2-5. This is a resolution approving the final permanent appropriations, take out one of the Ps, number 5 for the Village of Boston Heights for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I'll make a motion to suspend.
Yeah.
Everybody jumped on.
Okay.
Take
so
your
I
break.
don't know. Let's see,
Yeah,
we have,
have Janet.
I see Janet Miller and Ron
Yeah,
Fenn, so
that's good.
whatever order we do that in, Mrs. Klingenberg.
Ladies first.
I got it.
Okay, all right.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
yes,
and Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay. So we have the motion to suspend the 3 reading rule. I've heard from Mr. Poliak, and we'll wait till we finish this resolution to go to the audience participation. So let's move forward then with this resolution. We need a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-5.
I'll
Janet
make a
Miller,
motion.
you making a motion?
Who-
I'll make a motion to adopt
Ron Antel?
or second.
Yeah, we'll just do, I made the first one, Janet seconded. That'll be
Okay,
easier.
thank you.
quick.
Perfect.
Okay.
Ron and then Janet. Okay.
All right, any discussion on this?
You got this. This is the permanent appropriations. It's housekeeping. It just goes through all of our our beginning balance, the different resources, the fund adjustments, the transfers, and the total revenue and adjustments. And the final appropriations is the last column, and that's what's in our computer, that particular column. We never appropriate the total amount that we are expecting to get.
Okay. Are there any
Okay.
other questions on this particular resolution?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so we have a resolution made by Mr. Antal, seconded by Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Klingenberg, roll call, please.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak.
Yes. Did we suspend the rules for this?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
and Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Yes, to answer your question, Mr. Poliak, motion was made by Mr. Antal and seconded by Mrs. Davis. And all voted yes, including you.
Yep.
Okay, so I understand we have a audience participant who would like to address the council.
Yes, Cindy Palumbo. Cindy, I'm going to go ahead and bring you into the meeting. Okay. Cindy, you're now a part of the meeting, and you can go ahead and I think the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. I attended a BZA meeting on last Wednesday, and one of my questions were, of course, I'm very upset about the 100% of the trees coming down across the street. And it was my understanding a while back that we possibly were working on a buffer. And I know Bill had talked about not keeping the trees because it was something about, I don't know, the trees falling down or anyways. I wanted to know that what actually is the buffer going to be? Because I think, Bill, that you had said that nothing was final. So I would think they'd have to know that, like something that was final before they went ahead.
We have Jason Popeil here this evening. Are you
Sure.
aware of this project, Jason?
No, which one is this?
This is the Pure Development Project. It's
Yeah.
bordered by the Turnpike, Old 8 Road, Heinz Hill Road, and Dean Memorial Parkway.
Yeah, Brian filled me in a little bit on Pure Development. It's working its way through with Soil and Water and Army Corps with clearing, but I don't have a lot of details on it. I can definitely find things out for you as you need
Okay,
to.
so you really didn't study the 100-foot buffer all the way around that they're putting a mound in that? And, well, I don't know if anyone knows more than I do, but again, that has not changed, Cindy. That buffer is going to be high enough to shield anything that's on the east side of it. So it will be between Old 8 and the actual property that's getting developed. Marshall, I know, has been working also on this, but I don't know that he knows anything more about it. But as I said, what was approved is a mound that starts at the Turnpike property to the south end, runs all the way up Old 8 Road, turns, runs down Heinz Hill Road, stops at the Paychex property, picks up again on the other side of the Paychex property where there is a driveway, goes all the way basically around 3 sides of the facility as mounding with trees planted on it.
Okay, but we don't know the height or the type of trees or anything like that. I mean, is it comparable to our house?
It is
Is
going
it
to be that kind of a project, yes.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the landscaping plan, the final landscaping plan has not been submitted. What was approved was cutting down of some of the trees and the concept of putting up the buffer, as the mayor described, all the way around. And then ultimately, before the project is finalized, there will be a landscape plan that gets submitted and approved by the village engineer and the zoning inspector's office. And the discussions have been all along that it should look exactly like, if not even more natural than the buffer that is around the R House project.
Yes, I mean,
So that's been the discussions in every conversation that I've been involved with, but I'm not involved in a lot of these engineering discussions. It's kind of moved past my phase in the project, and I was not able to participate in the hearing last week, so I didn't hear final discussions. But my understanding is that to the extent that the mayor and I have been involved, it is the buffer is going to be higher and have more trees than the R House project, and at a minimum will look, similar to it. But that final decision is up to OHM before it's approved.
so for sure though, the 100% of the trees will be cut down.
That would shock me, because the trees down that are closer to the turnpike, I don't think that there was a need to cut those down. I don't remember seeing that in the plans. It's not my understanding. I think it was only the trees necessary to kind of get the project started, but I reserve the right to be wrong on that, but that's not my understanding, I should say.
So will the mound be made before? I mean, are we going to then hear everything and see everything that's across? I mean, as they're building it, or is that mound supposed to be a buffer and then they go ahead?
No, that's a fair question. You will see the mound go up before they go vertical, if you will, right before they put the actual building up, because it's going to be a part of what's called the site prep, right? So they're going to be pushing dirt around all over the place. First, they have to cut the trees, then they push the dirt all around, pack it down. They have to build their water retention system and build that all up around, and then that will include the mounds and what would be the west and the north side, and then you'll see the building go up after that.
So once they have that final buffer, do they bring it to council to vote? I mean,
the buffer was included in the original plan that was approved last, was that in January? It was in December, I guess. And it's included, and it's also part of the zoning. Right? There's also a built-in zoning buffer, so they can't make that any smaller than has already been approved. And to the extent that the buffer would come back before council, the plan would have to change substantially according to the code. It's been approved, and with the minor details and the engineering plans and those kinds of things, subject to the engineer's final sign off. If the plan changes substantially, then it would have to come back to the planning commission according to our code.
okay. All right. Well, it's just that it's a shock to think 100% of the trees would go down. And I don't think anybody living in this village even knows about this project and is going to be really shocked when they go by and see that. And that would be my whole thing, that people driving by shouldn't really, that beauty should still stay.
Was it your understanding that they were cutting down all the trees between where the building's going to be and the turnpike? Is that what you mean? Like
Yeah, it said 100%.
Every single
Maybe
tree.
that's why. Okay, I swear, I thought they said 100% on Wednesday would be, someone asked that.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know, maybe Bill can clarify that.
I think that question was asked, but I think who was answering that question really didn't look at the whole plan. And I've been talking with our engineers since then. We know some of them are going to stay. We know that on the mound, we're going to be replanting evergreen trees and possibly mixed with some deciduous. Right now, all you have are deciduous trees, which means about half the time of the year when the leaves fall and all that, you really don't have much of a buffer, even with those trees. When you plant evergreens, which keep their needles all year long, you have more of a buffer and more of a sound deadening device, and those are going to be on top of the mound. There's also going to be plantings in the islands that go throughout the parking lots. So even though older trees that are now dying, as you look across the street, some of those have fallen already. So as that is being changed, they're going to be replaced with trees in the island that are younger, and they're going to develop into full-scale trees as this goes along. So it's a replacement. It's like reforestation. And granted, it's not going to be as tall or big in the beginning, but then it's probably going to be healthier than the trees that are there that, as you see, fall. And sometimes we have to clean them up as they come toward the road.
And I have one more question, one more statement. I just living on this road, the traffic and the semis that are flying down here now is unbelievable. And I've heard many accidents happen right on that corner just from having my windows open. And I wondered if council had anything in plan to kind of deter that. And I know if they have business in the village, there's not necessarily, we can stop it, but literally they fly down this road, semis.
And that sounds like something that I need to take up with the police department again. We have had them out there. Over the years, we've had that up and down Old 8. We've put police out there. The residents have watched, stood there with the police, saw that it just seems when a big truck's going down the road, it's really speeding. But as it turns out, it's maybe 3 to 5 miles an hour at the most over the speed limit. But there certainly can be some that are driving faster, and we definitely need to take that into account and accordingly fine them.
Okay.
So that's something we can take up. I will take up with the chief tomorrow morning and say we need to have more patrolling. And if there are trucks there, the thing is, Cindy, that is a minor arterial road. We get federal dollars to repair that road. We cannot put a sign up that says no trucks. Either that, if we do, and we take that back and make it a private road, then we're responsible for all the paving on it. Last time it was repaved, cost over $3 million. Our road levy brings in, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Klingenberg, about $500,000 a year.
Right.
So that means we would never have the money to repave that road if we took it off of federal status. So we have to balance, monies we have coming in with what we have. So we will definitely look into if there are trucks there that are speeding, we'll have to slow them down. If they're not going to some place that's right on Old 8 or off of it, we're going to try and deter them. But here again, we cannot stop them.
Just, Mayor, if I may, I just want to clarify the plan with respect to the trees. What I was talking about is I don't think that the trees between the site and the turnpike itself are being cleared. I do think that the trees on most of the site are being cleared because you've got the parking lot and the building. But the response to that is, as the mayor pointed out, there's going to be the buffer and the trees on the buffer as well as kind of throughout the parking lot. But hopefully, and hopefully our engineers and the inspectors will hold their feet to the fire, and I'm sure they will. The buffer is intended to block all of that. So maybe the trees that are on the, let's call it the pure development property are probably going to get cut for purposes of pushing all the soil around. I don't think that the trees that are up against the highway are being cut. So that's what I meant. If I would be surprised if they were all of the trees, because I don't think that between the turnpike and the site, those were going to be cut. Could be wrong, but that's what I was speaking about earlier.
And Cindy, if you recall, part of what we talked about was along Old 8, it's going to be grading change. So anytime you start digging next to trees and you undermine the system by them and they don't have the same amount of water in that, they're going to die anyway. So it's better to remove them, put the right grade in that you need to do the project and for the mound, and then replant new trees on those that are gonna be established in a proper kind of setting.
Yeah, Mayor, while you guys were talking, I was able to locate the preliminary landscaping plan, and you're correct, there's a large buffer along Old 8, and they're proposing at least a 3-foot mound, and it says possibly more, and one new tree every 40 feet with shrubbing in between.
Okay, how do we increase that? Where do we go before we lose control of how inadequate that is? A 3-foot mound is,
No, that's minimum. That's minimum. It depends on the
okay,
grade.
sorry.
And when it gets more in depth, when they get further along in the design, we can definitely look at that and
Okay.
make sure that the site distance is covered. Make sure you can't see.
Jason, what I'm understanding from what you're saying is one tree every 40 foot. So we're saying bigger trees are going to be along the mound beside the evergreen trees that are going to
Correct.
be between them. So that's an attempt to make it look, more landscaped. I don't believe that on the R House Mount, Cindy, there are any larger trees to any extent planted, deciduous trees that get taller like what was there, so.
But that mound is a lot bigger than 3 feet.
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah.
the difference with this site is that there's only one building that's going to be here at Pure Development, and it is, for lack of a better phrase, kind of way downhill.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't have there was a sightline exhibit that was prepared, and it demonstrated on the, if you will, on the west side, on the Old 8 side, as you were on the roadway, you would not be able to see the building with the mounds as they were proposed. So I'm expecting the mound to not only be sufficiently high, but also kind of undulating with the trees, as the mayor described, for a more natural look, as opposed to a static.
The other thing, yeah. I think the other thing that you notice is the mound that was put there just to get started with having a mound from Heinz Hill going south. That mound really maybe is 3 to 5 feet high, but on the east side of that mound, the ground is probably 8 or 10 feet lower if you walk around the other side. So if
You're
there's
right.
something parked on the other side, on the east side of that mound, Cindy, if it's 8 or 10 feet tall, which is what these vans will be at the most, you're not going to see any of it from the mound. And then we're planting trees on top of that. So that was the thing. And I think, Jason, if you looked at that, you'll see that all along that east side of the project, they're going to be grading that down to level it off some. So it is going to be lower on the east side of the mound than it is on the west side of the mound toward Old 8.
Just to clarify, are they following what it's zoned for in the way of that buffer? I'm assuming they are. They didn't ask for any variance or anything like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
No, but they did ask for, a riparian setback. I was not able to get a hold of the, I didn't listen to the, but I didn't listen to the zoning meeting, but the planning and zoning, but they were, correct me if I'm wrong, they were asking for a variance on the riparian setbacks because of the wetlands that are on that property. That was last week?
That was for the tree cutting. They're not allowed to really go in that riparian area until they get an Army Corps and Summit Soil and Water approval of that.
Okay, so they
when
are,
you're saying
okay.
that all the trees are going to be cleared, the ones that are in the riparian probably are not at this point.
Okay, so I guess, okay. I think the first thing that alarmed people from what I was hearing from some constituents was when they heard 100% of the trees will be cut. I think that their impression was that 100% of the trees on the entire property edge to edge, north to south, east to west, Turnpike to Heinz Hill, Dean Parkway to Old Eight, every tree was going to be cut. I think that that's been made clear tonight that that's not true. Is that correct? Like the trees are supposed to be the right of way for the Turnpike. Those trees will be left. Correct?
The trees that are along the Turnpike, Janet, are not affected in the grading plan. So those probably will be left, yes. I think Jason, if he's looking at that, he's probably seeing that. If we're looking at the rest of it, it's really going to be very similar to what was done across the street at our house in Costco. A mound was put in, trees were replaced, but basically, in order to grade the land was lowered on one side, raised on the other. You can't backfill trees. You can't undercut them so much that they're out of the ground. So those trees are going to die. We have to replace those trees with new trees. And that's what this landscape plan does, is replace trees throughout the site.
So I would ask that, is there someone that I could walk the property with that could give me an idea where the, I just don't have, I've driven there, I have pictures of it. I just don't have a good idea. I just don't have a good feel for where that mound is going to go, how far it's going to continue, and then where the Turnpike property ends and begins. And is there someone that would be available to walk that property with me?
Well, Janet, perhaps I could. I'm not sure that anyone from Pure Development will be out there, but what I'm going to tell you is, very simply, the mound that's there now is going to be extended south toward the Turnpike. And where there's fencing and there's that phone company box where you see a van parked many times, that phone company box is on Turnpike property. So as a result, any of the trees that are there, because that, I think when you're thinking clear cut, this is all the way to the Turnpike, top of the Turnpike. It is not. It is to the Turnpike property, and perhaps even a little less, because the plan doesn't take it right up to the Turnpike property. Does that help to answer any questions?
That helps. Yeah, that definitely helps.
Okay.
I was asked also if they take down the trees on the along Old 8.
Yes.
I was told recently they will be taking, they're cutting down those trees along Old 8. They're going to leave the stumps and the roots in order to secure the dirt, the land.
Well,
in order to,
That is correct. They're going to cut all the trees along Old 8. And then in order to push the mound up and to make it the 100 feet wide buffer, and then they're going to replant the trees. But that is correct.
Okay.
If your question is, are they cutting 100% of the trees along Old 8 up to the property line? I believe that is accurate.
and the reason
So
we
can they leave?
Right, they got to put the mound in.
So, right, and they're not going to do that till, I mean, they could take the tree, they're going to be taking the trees down as soon as like tomorrow without any approval.
They're probably going to do it before March, the end of March. Typically,
Right.
you see
And that's,
developers do it at the end of March.
but that's before they get approval from Summit Soil and Water and the Army Corps.
Well, they won't do it unless they get that permit, because we won't let them do that. Like our permit is contingent on the approval from the Army Corps or from the other agencies.
Okay.
I don't know which ones, but typically you see it, the Army Corps and the Summit Soil and Water.
Okay, if they have that approval and they go in and take the trees down and are leaving stumps, would they leave the brush also?
No,
I
my
mean,
guess is they're going to
just-
take the stumps out too, right? Because you can't push the dirt around. You're going to tear all of that out and you're going to rebuild the mounds.
Jason, if
Well, I
you want
mean-
to jump in, but I'm gonna tell you right now, Janet and Marshall, the reason the stumps.
I'm just saying the
left-
sequencing I'm asking for is what I'm looking for. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor. I
The
wasn't
thing
at
is-
the meeting.
The trees have to be cut down before the Indiana bat starts nesting, and that deadline is May 31st, April 1st, one of those 2 days. Okay, so they're getting permission to remove the trees so that they will be able to do the grading afterwards, because after that deadline, they won't be able to cut them until October or November of the same year of 2021. So that pushes this project another year behind. But as a result, but what I'm saying is they're leaving the stumps, so there's not going to be erosion until they get in and actually do the grading. Because the stumps are going to hold the dirt in place. Once they come in and they start grading, yeah, then they're going to put erosion control fencing up and whatever they need, and they're going to remove the stumps. But those are left because of the fact that you would have water runoff.
Right.
Is there anything
So-
you want to add to that, Jason?
No, you got it right. They're gonna leave the stumps and they're not going to do any grading until they have approval from Summit Soil and Water on their grading plan.
Right.
So the trees will come down, so the trees will come down, but all the brush and all the other vegetation that's there that aren't trees will be left, along with the stumps,
The stumps
until such time as they actually do the actual landscaping.
Yeah, they're gonna leave everything they can that supports the dirt. So the brush and bushes will probably come down, but they're not gonna take the roots out. They can't do any earth moving activities. They can
They're gonna
just-
take the brush and
I would
they're
assume,
gonna take the brush and,
probably, I don't know, I haven't, they're gonna cut whatever they can before April 1st and not do any earth movement until they get approval from Soil and Water, because they're not allowed. So they're not gonna disturb any earth. They're not gonna be no dozers breaking ground, which means you can't move stumps because that breaks ground.
I think that, Janet, that's where I would draw the line. The distinction is when the bulldozers come, that's when the roots come out. But until the bulldozers come, they're going to essentially clear everything else but leave the stumps for purposes of preventing erosion.
And just so that most of you, or that all of you know here, Jason Popeil is the fellow that we've been working with at Croc Esser and now at OHM. And he's the one who works on our national pollution,
Yeah, the MS4 permit.
our NS4 permit. So he knows all about this. He knows what they're doing and what they're going to do and what they cannot do until the proper time comes. So,
In my experience, the brushes and the bushes will probably remain. They're just gonna cut the trees down. They'll move all the other stuff when they take stumps out. That's more efficient.
right. Okay. Other questions?
trees. Some of us received a letter today from a constituent. Did we answer those questions that they had in that letter today? Are you, I think Don was CC'd on it and the mayor from Jim Herchek.
I did not receive the letter today.
No, I don't know, Jen. I wasn't, if that came in after 10, 11 o'clock this morning, I probably didn't check my email. So I don't know. I will answer it tomorrow.
Okay.
Was it similar questions to what Cindy had?
Yes, I believe so. Cindy, if you're still on, was there something else that was, I mean, part of it was 100% of the trees. I mean, I think that when the person from Pure Development said that, people that were listening, constituents that were listening, all of a sudden heard 100% of the trees. They were, and then so in that email from Jim, he asked about, you know, the noise and the traffic study and, you know, how is that going to impact all these? But I think that when they heard 100% of the trees, they thought they just meant scorched earth policy on that entire development plan. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, that was that's how they interpreted that. So I'm trying to follow up with the experts here and the policymakers and say, you know, that that was not my impression that every single tree was going to be cut to the bare bones. I was under the impression that there was a right of way with the turnpike and the trees there. You know, I would hope that my concern and my hope is that wherever they can be leaving some natural green space, that they would be leaving green space. I mean, I think that where they can be replacing it, they'll be asked to replace it, because we're losing a lot of green space. I know they're trying to be, I know there's a lot of restrictions on and attention being paid to the runoff and the water runoff, and it's a very complicated project. I just want to make sure that we're not damaging worrying and damaging our trust with our constituents. I mean, if they don't, you know, someone had mentioned that the village doesn't know. The majority of the village, they feel, doesn't know that this project is in the works. And is there some way, this is kind of segueing from what I was talking about, but it's the same topic, but is there some way for us to, I mean, is that just up to us, us responsibility as council members to just individually, you know, call our neighbors and say, this is going on? Or when they start digging ground and people call me and say, well, we didn't know this was going on. What's happening? You know, we've had public meetings for building the fire station, and public meetings for the Army Corps of Engineers coming, when the Army wanted to come in and do the reserve, when they wanted to consolidate the 10 Army Reserve units. I mean, we've had public meetings for those things. And I understand that this is a unique time with the pandemic, but I just wish that we could be communicating with our community, that they weren't feeling like something is being done that they aren't aware of. I don't know if any of the rest of you have gotten that feedback, but I have. And anybody have any suggestions?
Janet, that's a great idea, but it's a little late now. It's a done deal. It's a done deal. And if I attended, I'm like Sydney, I attended the BZA meeting last week, and they're gonna cut 100% of the trees down. Yes, they're not gonna cut the trees down on a turnpike right of way, but they're gonna cut all the trees down on 58 acres, Janet, and it's a done deal. They're doing it. And it's a little late to be concerned about it now.
Well, I disagree. I totally disagree with you that it's a little late to be concerned about it, because I've not given up my right to have a voice in what's happening over there. And if I have constituents along Old 8, right, and I drove along Old 8, I want to know where that mound is going to be, how high it's going to be, what trees they're taking down, and how far they are. I would like it even marked or something. I mean, no, it's never too late. Nothing's been dug. Everything is still sitting there. So, you know, if we have concerns and we have citizens and constituents that have concerns, then we darn well better speak up right now, or it will be too late. So I want my constituents to be able to come to me, my friends and my neighbors, and say, hey, what is going on? And I'm concerned. And that's my job, is to say, bring it forward to council, no matter how uncomfortable it makes anybody else feel, and say, well, what's going on? And let's assure everybody that the best practices are being taken, and, you know, we're doing the best for everyone. This is not something that's, I'm getting feedback that there's, you know, suspicious activity because they didn't know about this, and at the last minute they found out about it. So I don't want to go into the tinfoil hat conspiracy theories that, oh, we hid this from the public and then we sprang it on them. I mean, well, open and transparent. I don't know, put it out there that, you know, anything that they want to know about peer development and what's happening there is available through recorded meetings that we've had, or, you know, where do we give them access to that, right? All the meetings that we've had in the past, that if they want to listen to them, or if they need to call anybody, reach out. I mean, nobody attends these meetings, so I don't know how to reach out to people en masse and say, if you have questions about this, this is how you get a hold of us. Does anyone else have this concern that it's?
I think that what's really confusing as a resident is I was at the meetings along with a lot of other residents when Marshall stood up there and we all voted on that Boston Heights overlay. And that was going to protect us from not getting sued again, or not having something in our village like a giant brick wall to stare at. It gave us some control. And then that beautiful picture that we were sold on that possibly might be, that was a vision. I would think that was something that everybody thought might happen. And then Petros came and changed it into housing. And then they were gonna have a road, not off of Heinz Hill, but in front of Old 8, in front of Herchecks, and turn in there. So then we're like, okay, so we're gonna have this beautiful condos, townhouses that were upper scale. Okay. Then all of a sudden, we heard about a delivery station, not named because it's supposed to be a secret. And that's why the distrust comes. It's like, okay, is this for Mr. Petros and the pure development? Or is it for Boston Heights? Like, what are we getting from this? And I know it's going to be money. I understand that. If you have a right to develop and make money and you guys do the figures and numbers, that's your job. But not at the expense of the residents here, because this would not go, in my opinion, in front of all of your developments. You would be fighting hard, and you would be darn sure that there was a buffer. And I guarantee people living down there who aren't directly affected but are driving every day to work will say, what happened? What's going on? Why are all the trees down? So I feel a little bit that I was sold on the Boston Heights overlay, and that gave me some peace. And then boom, somebody comes in and has a variance because they couldn't make money. And it's his right to do that, and he bought the land. But it's, in my eyes, it's your right to go to your residents and say, we got to listen to our residents. You could do all that, but we got to make sure that they're happy too. So I think that's the bottom line for me.
So what would make you happy? I mean, I'm honestly
happy is that I could see some trees there. But I mean, like Bob said, it's a done deal. What would make me happy is that people in the ledges in Woodview and Ashbrook knew that that was even happening. Nobody knows that a delivery station or Amazon, whatever it's going to be called, is coming there. And I think that's like some kind of secrecy. I mean, that just, I know I was given a letter because I had to be told I'm an adjoining property, but nothing happened before that. And I think that was protocol because they had to do it to cover everybody's self. And that makes me sad as a resident who's lived here since 89 and has fought the Mills Mall, has fought the delivery stations, has fought a hospital and supposedly a racetrack and the government. I mean, there were times I thought, no way, we're going to win this. And just the fact that we're a gateway to the park, I would think that would lead to anything as far as getting green space and having the government help us in some way. And I might be wrong, but I don't think any of you would want this across from your house. So I would be darn sure to make sure my residents were okay with this, even though there's a small number compared to other areas. That's my piece.
Are there any other questions?
My question is, again, back to my colleagues, do you have any comments to make after the questions that I had about transparency and constituent, getting information out to our constituents, or have you heard back from constituents about this going on, or? am I the only one that is getting, you know, phone calls and emails from concerned residents? Anybody?
I've received no emails over this. When it comes to being transparent, I mean, they're invited to every council meeting. I mean, they're all public meetings. You know, I don't know. We don't have a newspaper. We have a newsletter. We could announce those, but those only go out quarterly. So it's kind of difficult. I think we post the agendas in public, how many public locations? We have to have them in 3, is that correct? 5? Okay.
It's online too, isn't it?
Yeah,
Posted
It
online.
is online.
it is
Bill
online.
Hinman stream a lot of these meetings.
And we made it noted that you want to look at the plans, they are here for public inspection. I think we've had 2 people come in and look at them.
I still think that most people don't know, and then I'll leave this as a moot point, but because I saw a public meeting when it came to the Norwood, which I know has issues in itself, but I never saw a public meeting when it came to Amazon or this delivery station. I was just blown away because the last thing I walked away from, Petros, was building houses. So something must have happened way before we even were notified. That's what I'm.
If I may, this is just a strictly a procedural clarification.
Okay.
All of the issues that you were talking about where the council had different meetings and when we had changed the zoning and whatnot, all of those issues were before the village council. The difference, one procedural difference here is that none of the council members here voted for the pure development project. As a formal matter, they supported the concept, but the actual committee, if you will, it was the planning commission that actually had the authority to change and allow the variance. That's not to say that the folks on council here didn't think it was a good idea, but as a technical matter, and this is what I'm saying from a procedural perspective, you can't be upset with the council members here because the decision to allow the change from the overlay to what is there now was granted by the BZA and then approved by the planning commission on their site plan approval. So it's just it's a minor procedural point, but it does matter if because you're talking to the members of council, they didn't change those issues. They didn't allow for the variance. I think they supported the project, but again, legally, the changes were made by the BZA and the planning commission.
I understand that. I just wanted to know why the Norwood was a public meeting, because of course that catches my eye compared to like something like this.
You just explained it.
I don't know the difference. Like, I don't understand. How was when you're saying you received notice?
No, I mean, it said public meeting on the board.
It's coming up, you're talking about coming up on February 18th. There's gonna be
I think there
is
was
that
one
correct?
BZA meeting,
No, Janet
Public
was
meeting.
talking about
and
the.
that's not on the board.
Back last year.
It said public meeting, yeah.
For Norwood?
Yes,
Yes.
it was a public meeting last year on the North.
Okay.
I think all the meetings have
Remember,
been
Janet?
public.
All the meetings are public, Bob.
All the meetings are public. I don't know.
Well, that was just on the board. That's why I said that.
Was it a
Public
change,
hearing.
were they asking for a zoning change? Was that when Norwood was asking for a zoning change so they could turn it into,
Yes, that's
They got
correct.
turned down.
because they were asking to change it into residences from a hotel? Right, okay, well, that was why.
What Sydney's asking is, why did Norwood have to have a special meeting to change the zoning, but pure development didn't have to have a special meeting?
The legal
And do
difference.
you know why that is, Bob?
Go ahead.
Because we
Why
didn't
is
change
that,
the
Bill?
zoning.
Why is that, Bill?
Because we did not change the zoning, Bob. You
We
were at
didn't
every
change the
meeting,
zoning.
you should understand that.
Okay?
Right.
Thank you.
There's no zone change on these parcels that that Cindy's asking about? There's no zoning change?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
There was no zoning change. There were variances that
correct,
were granted.
They were variant. There's a difference.
Legally, they're different. Bob, legally, they're different.
Variances.
Sorry, go ahead.
We're obligated to have a public meeting when we do a zoning change. That doesn't apply to variances, and variances are granted all the time. My concern was to hear that there was a variance granted for the riparian setbacks,
Right.
because that's something that back in when Dr. Chung was on council, we worked on the riparian setback ordinances for a very long time and attended, wetland seminars and different conferences of, to educate ourselves on the importance of the riparian setbacks in terms of environmental safety. And I want us to still be, I think that's a priority going in here. I do feel more confident after our meeting tonight that environmental concerns have been
Addressed.
front and center with this development. I felt that at the beginning, and then I started to have my doubts because of some of the feedback I was getting from constituents. And I think that I like I said, I thought when I heard 100, when someone came to me and said they said 100% of the trees were coming down, and they thought it was all the way to the edge of I needed to ask. I needed to bring it up. It was misinformation, right? It's misinformation. We need to be able to tell anybody that asks us what the correct information is. So now we're waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers and Summit Soil Water to make their determinations about where and how, and the cut down, what can be cut and what can't, or what needs to be mitigated where, and how things are handled for all this right environmental reasons. Those things are still in the works. The final landscape plan has not been, it's a preliminary plan. The final landscape plan is still to be worked on, correct? So basically, if our residents stay engaged, they can be a part of those public meetings when we talk about the landscaping plan. Am I right or wrong about that?
I don't think there
We can make-
more public, I'm not aware of there being any more public meetings.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying council meetings.
Well,
Council meetings.
Council meetings, and I would encourage all of the council members who have questions about the landscape plan to reach out to Jason and to Brian and to Arthur as that process moves forward, because they're the ones who are going to be overseeing that piece of it. So to the extent that you want to be involved, it's not something that I'm involved with, or that the mayor's involved with. It's now through the act of the Planning Commission. It's now in the hands of OHM.
Okay.
So
Jen,
there you go. You heard it from everybody. You heard it from Marshall. You heard it from the mayor. They're not going to cut you can tell all your constituents that called you, they're not going to cut 100% of the trees down. You could tell them that. You could tell them that you heard it at the council meeting, that they're not going to cut 100% of the trees down.
I forgot, was there a question on the floor here?
Well,
I was asking for your input.
we ended one
Public comment.
resolution, Ron.
It was
We
public
went to,
comment.
because we didn't have anyone for open forum. Now we're at open forum. Cindy, have we answered your questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on then. The next resolution we have is Resolution 2021-2-6. That is a resolution authorizing all actions necessary to accept the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, NOPAC, energized community grants, and declaring an emergency. In order to consider this, we need a motion to suspend.
I'll make a
Three
motion
reading
to
rule.
suspend the 3 reading rule.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Second.
I will second.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Roll call.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
and Mrs. Miller. Mrs.
Yes,
All right,
thank you.
motion is carried. We would now ask for a motion to adopt resolution 2021-2-6.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Thank you, Ron. A second?
No second.
Thank you, Ron. Fenn. Ron Antel, Ron Fenn. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on resolution 2021-2-6. Mrs. Klingenberg, would you take the roll?
Yes, Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Okay. Resolution motion passes, becomes resolution 2021-2-6. Moving on to resolution 2021-2-7. I would like to make one procedural change here. I sent an email to Marshall. I think this is something in the writing that we kind of added, but let me just read it. As I'm reading it, I'm going to show you what I'm changing. A resolution declaring it necessary to renew the, and right now on your agendas, it says tax levy. It actually should say road levy, because we don't have a levy called tax levy. Road levy at the tax rate of 2.75 mil, and requesting the Summit County Fiscal Officer to certify the total current tax valuation of the village and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by this renewal levy and declaring an emergency. So in order to do this, Marshall, correct me if I'm wrong, we would need to have a motion to change tax to road. Am I correct? So I would ask for a motion to do that first.
I so move.
Thank you, Ron. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ron Antel. So that's going to be there. So we'll do that even before we suspend the rules.
Do you want me to do the rest of them?
Yes, I
Everybody
think
else
we should.
Okay,
Can we do it that way, Marshall? To change that
I
before
can do
we
what Betty
actually,
said.
should we
approve
take
it.
the amendment to the ordinance? Do we do it before the motion to suspend the 3 reading rule, or do we wait till afterwards?
I would do it after. I would do it after the, after you
Okay.
suspend the rules, after you have a motion and a second, and during discussion is where I would prefer it to be.
Okay, all right. So everyone knows what it is. We do have the addendum amendment made by Mr. Anton, Mr. Fenn. We can bring that in when the needed time. So right now, in order to consider resolution 2021-2-7, we need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Fenn. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Roll call, Betty?
yes. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Bartko.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. We'll now ask for a motion to adopt resolution 2021-2-7.
I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Fenn. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Antel. All right, we can have discussion then. I would suggest that we make that change so everyone understands that this is a road levy, not a fire levy, and is not just, it needs to have a title on it. So that's why I suggested that. Since we have that, is there other discussion on this particular resolution? Okay, seeing none, we have an amendment made by Mr. Antel, seconded by Mr. Fenn, that changes the first word tax in the resolution to the word road levy. And do I need to reread the whole thing for everyone, or do they understand what we're doing? Are we good?
You're good.
All right.
Good.
All right, so we have a motion made by Mr. Antel, seconded by Mr. Fenn. Let's take, on that amendment, let's take that roll call first.
Okay. Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller, sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
and Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now for the actual motion itself, which was made by Mr. Fenn, seconded by Mr. Antel. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, let's take the roll call, Mrs. Klingenberg.
Okay, Mr. Fenn, rather,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. Bartko.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2021-2-7 has passed. Let's now move on to Resolution 2021-2-8, a resolution establishing the use rate and rental rates for the Village of Boston Heights pools, park, and pavilion for the year 2021 and declaring an emergency. Need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule to consider this.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Bob. We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Roll call, Mrs. Klingenberg.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. Fenn.
Yes.
Yeah. Motion carries. I would now ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-8.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Thank you, Mr. Antel. Second.
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Bartko. Any discussion on this? The rates are shown there. As we talked about at the finance meeting, there is a slight increase in all of those to help cover cost. Because as we know, every year the pool maintenance and that by our management company increases slightly in cost. So, all right. I see no discussion items. Let's move on to voting on the motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-8.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
and Mr. Poliak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That becomes Resolution 2021-2-8. Resolution 2021-2-9 is a resolution appointing Natalie Van Cannell, Clerk of the Mayor's Court for the Village of Boston Heights, effective February 1st. That's a typo. It should say 1st
So
there.
the new one said February 1st. You have an old one.
Yeah, I know the ordinance or the resolution itself does, but if you're following along on the agenda, it might still have one.
Right.
Through December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. We first need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Marco. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Roll call.
Mr. Bartko? Yes. Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I now need a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-9.
I'll make a motion. to
Make a
adopt.
motion to second.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. For those of you who know, I did send out an email, I believe. You should all realize that our clerk of court had to resign because of health reasons, Katie Yanovich. So Natalie Van Candle has been assisting her in that office, and
I'm sorry
is
to hear
appropriate to take over because she knows the operation. So that's why I'm asking for this resolution to appoint her, and I will move ahead then with that. So we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-9. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, take the roll call.
Antel? Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
And Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That becomes Resolution 2021-2-9. Next, we have a resolution to award the Brandywine Road Phase 1 contract to Perrin Asphalt and declaring an emergency. I need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule for Resolution 2021-2-10.
I so move.
Who was
Okay,
that?
Ron Fenn, who seconded? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Poliak. Roll call, Mrs.
Mis-
Lingenberg.
Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
And Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion passed. I now ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-10.
I'll make a motion to adopt.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Any discussion on this? I believe the numbers were shown there for you. They were the lowest and best bid on this project as reviewed by OHM advisors.
Yeah, we checked all the contract requirements, references, equipment, materials. There's no reason not to accept Karen's bid.
Thank you, Mr. Copio. Okay. Any other questions from the council? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Mrs. Klingenberg?
Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes, becomes Resolution 2021-2-10. Final resolution of the evening is Resolution 2021-2-11. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with OHM advisors regarding the evaluation of all 21 miles of village streets and declaring an emergency. Need a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule.
I so move.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Second. Mr. Fenn?
Yes.
Mr. Antel?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
And Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
No idea.
Okay. That passed. We now need a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-2-11.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Bartko. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, let's take the roll.
Mr. Poliak?
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yeah.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
and Mr. Antel.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes, becomes resolution 2021-2-11. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Mayor's report. As I reported, our clerk of courts, Catherine Inovich, has resigned because of health reasons, and I accepted her resignation with regret, because she was a good person, and she did a good job in that office, and I'm sure Mrs. Van Cannell will do the same. Next thing I have on the notes here is Dominion Gas sent a winter natural gas safety tip sheet, which I will post on the website and up in the lobby here. But basically, if you smell gas in your house or around your house, you should call Dominion immediately. They have 24-hour line, 1-877-542-2630, and they will send someone out to evaluate what your problem is. So, as I said, we'll put this on the website. We'll post it in the front hall. Next, I have just a little bit of news item, and I don't always do this, but I did receive an email from Sky Zone. They have been closed because of the COVID, but they are planning on reopening this Thursday. So, the business coming back that has been affected by the pandemic. Valentine's Day is coming up this Sunday. Keep that in mind. And the final item I have here is our fiscal officer celebrating a birthday today. I'm not saying the number, but I think we should
Been a lot of them.
all wish her a happy birthday or sing a song.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Betty. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, that
All
was
right.
beautiful.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Speech.
Speech. My only speech is that, Mr. Mayor, did you want to accept Katie Inovich's resignation formally?
Yes. Did I miss that? I did.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So that's the last part of my thing. So I would need a motion to accept Katie Inovich's resignation.
I so move with regrets.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Do we have a second?
Very nice.
I'll second it with one question. How long was Katie clerk of courts?
Since
November
October of,
November of 2012.
November 2012.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah, she was clerk of courts for a long time.
yeah.
We're gonna
Okay.
miss her.
So we have a motion and a second. Take the roll, please, Mrs. Klingenberg.
Mr. Fenn,
Yes.
Mr. Bartko,
Yes.
Mr. Antel,
Yes.
Mr. Poliak,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Move on to the fiscal officer report.
If anybody has a question about the appropriations, please ask. I'll be happy to try to answer it for you. Other than that, we're just
Okay.
closing the year out. We're opening up the other year, 221. We're closing out 220. We're doing reports on the coronavirus, monies, and several other things.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for Betty? Seeing none, we go to committee reports. Safety Committee, Valley Fire, anything new?
No, nothing new or out of the ordinary.
Okay. Roads Committee, Cemetery Trustees,
No, it's all quiet.
okay. Lands and Buildings,
Nothing. Nope.
okay. Economic Community Development?
Nothing unless you have something to report that's new and exciting.
I do not at this point.
Okay.
Planning Commission, BZA.
I just want to thank Mr. Antel for stepping in on the last meeting.
You're welcome, no problem.
Okay. And finally, the engineers report. We'll call on you, Jason. I know you, Brian probably sent one around, but you may want to talk about something there.
Sure. Well, besides the Brandywine Award and the PCR proposal that just went through, that's all I had to brief from Brian. He had nothing else on his report to talk about. So unless anyone has any questions or concerns that I can relay to anyone, I don't have anything additional.
Anyone have questions for our engineer?
No, but I do have a question about an upcoming meeting. If I might go back to Mr. Polyak.
Yep.
Planning BZA, there is an appeal by Norwood. Is that still happening on the 18th of February?
Yes, it is.
They're doing an appeal. Can you elaborate on that at all, or let me? I don't understand. There's a nuisance.
I may.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So the Public Nuisance Abatement Board met last year now and determined, after hearing the evidence from several different witnesses, that the hotel constituted a public nuisance and that an abatement plan was set in place. The property owner appealed the decision and as a result, appealed the decision to the BZA, which is according to the protocols in the nuisance abatement chapter. And
Okay.
essentially what's going to happen on the 18th is that the landowner is going to come in and present their arguments, if you will, on appeal, and our witnesses on behalf of the village are going to essentially restate the evidence that was given at the last hearing, as well as anything that's happened since. And then it'll be up to the BZA to review the decision and either adopt it, affirm it, or make any changes that they may wish.
Okay. Thank you.
It'll be via Zoom. Last time the meeting was in person. This time the meeting is going to be held via Zoom at the request of the BZA chair, and the landowner has agreed.
Right. And just for the record, the Nuisance Abatement Board made their decision on December 2nd of 2020. Thank you, Marcia. All right. Is there anything for old business?
No.
Anything for new business?
Nope.
I know of no reason for an executive session. So I ask for a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Ron Antel, second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye, all right. Those opposed, same sign. Okay. We're adjourned at 8:25.
Thanks, everyone.
Aye.
It is 8:25.
Night, all.
Happy
Night, everybody.
Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Betty.
Thank you.
Aw.